Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon series. My name's Kathy Tycholis. I'm the Education Public Programs Coordinator for the Richmond Art Gallery, and I'll be your host tonight, featuring three curators from across the Lower Mainland who are joining us in today to answer your questions. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we might all be Zooming from different places, but the Richmond Art Gallery is located on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples. This is the language spoken by Musqueam and many of the nations along the Fraser River Delta. So while we recognize our institution currently occupies and operates on traditional territory, we are very grateful to have the opportunity to create, live, and work in this land. So for those of you that are new to the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon series, it's a monthly series designed specifically for visual artists to give them some professional development tips, resource sharing, and inspiration to just keep on making work. So tonight's talk comes really from the viewer requests. You wanted to hear from different curators, how they find artists, how they work with artists, and maybe even what might the future of galleries be, as we're all in very uncertain times right now and just wondering what the art world holds for all of us. So tonight we have three curators. They all have experiences in different types of galleries. So each of them tonight will introduce themselves and some of their work that they've done over the past few years, just so you get to know them a little bit better before you start sending in all your questions. So we'll start with Will Aballe, who's the owner director of Will Aballe Art Projects, a commercial gallery based in Vancouver, BC, that also participates in art fairs and online exhibitions. So welcome, Will. Next, we'll hear from Heng. He is the curator and interim director of Centre A, the Vancouver International Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. That is a public gallery based in Vancouver. Along with being a curator, Henry is also an artist and a writer who works on projects in Vancouver, Toronto, and beyond. So welcome, Henry. And lastly, we'll have Shaun Dacey. So Shaun is the director curator for the Richmond Art Gallery, which is the City of Richmond's public art gallery. But Shaun also has previously worked at artist-run centers and public galleries throughout the Lower Mainland. So he'll bring that experience to us as well tonight. So thank you all three for coming tonight. And we'll start off with Will.
Right on. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good evening. Thanks, Kathy, for organizing this. Just wanted to walk through a brief history of the gallery and perhaps talk to the theme of the evening by talking about artists and art shows that I've been involved with. Next slide, please. Okay, so I guess a good place to start is to start with the current show. So I'm actually sitting in the current show right now. It's a show with an artist named Patrick Stashachuk, who's an artist who the gallery's been working with for quite some time. So this is actually the artist's second solo show with the gallery. He's also been involved in a number of group exhibitions, and we've taken him to art fairs. Next slide, please. The gallery is currently in Strathcona in a retail space, quite official looking as a gallery, but it actually started out of my apartment, out of a desire to create a new space in the city for artists, artist friends of mine who were making incredible work but weren't able to show it anywhere. So this is an example of one of the earliest shows that we had as a gallery. This was the third exhibition in 2013, and it was actually an exhibition with Marina Roy and Natasha McCarty. And this was a shot of my very small living room, dining room that I had at Scotia and Fifth. Next slide, please. After a couple of years in the apartments, it felt like every permutation of Heng, regardless of whether it's a photograph, painting, show drawings, they started to all look the same because the space was so limited. So we actually moved to a larger space on Francis Street that was what I thought to be institutionally scaled, had 14-foot ceilings, for instance, and it was a very large space, large room that's similar to a room at the Vancouver Art Gallery, for instance. And these are three successful exhibitions in that space. The big square is a show with Scott Billings, who used the full height of the space of 14 feet to create this kinetic sculpture. We also built these three 10 by 16 foot walls for Nicholas Sassoon, which actually is now the template every single time the show is in a museum. It showed at the House of Electronic Arts in Basel, for instance, last year in exactly the same configuration. So it's interesting because our little gallery has sort of set the standard as to how work should be shown. As we devised it here in Vancouver. And then lastly, Evan Siebens created this like multimedia installation in the space. Next slide, please. So when COVID happened this year and people weren't able to gather in public spaces, and we didn't feel comfortable kind of having people come in large numbers, we were trying to figure out how to do physical shows. So this was an example of kind of a type of thinking that we were going through. We meaning me as the curator and artists who I work with. So this is a show with a Calgary-based artist named Julia Rose Sutherland, who happens to be Indigenous, who made this work called Flesh Economics when she was doing her MFA at the University of Buffalo. We recontextualized Flesh Economics by situating it up against the window on East Hastings, where there's a lot of sex workers. And we felt very strongly that perhaps the light from the gallery at night, when the piece was viewable between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., would kind of provide a new sort of safe space along the Hastings corridor for sex workers and also people who happen to be about the street at that time of the evening. Next slide, please. So a lot of like what I feel like I do as a curator, despite the fact that this is a commercial gallery and like a huge kind of like endeavor aspect of the gallery is selling, because it's how we are able to survive, and it's one of our biggest purposes for artists to create a market for them. But context building is really, really important. So like, even if it's non-commercial, we've taken lots of different approaches to build context for artists, including commissioning writers to do some writing alongside artists' shows. So writers are also creative people in their own right. And so the writing doesn't necessarily have doesn't have to be art historical, art theoretical. This is an example of one such non-explanatory kind of text. This is a text by Julian Ocot-Patek, who's friends with Lise Lemieux, whose work was showing at the time. And her response to the show was to actually write a poem about felt. And we've similarly had, for instance, like a short story written for Dan Starling show, and we've had like another short story narrative essay written for Patrick Cruz, among others. Next slide, please. So part of like the reason why the gallery started is that we wanted to provide space for younger artists. And like over the 8 years the gallery's been around, we've shown a lot of young artists. This is an example with Daniel Giordano, who actually happens to be an American. He's based out of Newburgh, New York. So he showed some sculptures in the space, which was a very successful show for him. And as a result of his show, actually the body of work that we showed at WAP is now going to be part of a solo exhibition at Massachusetts MoCA in 2023. Next slide, please. Here are some other examples of other artists who we gave some of our first shows to. So Patrick Cruz did Quarantine of Difference in the space where he graffitied our walls. Vanessa Brown's first solo exhibition, The Hand of Camille, was at WAP. We also took Patrick Cruz to an art fair, NADA, where he was able to apply his installation sensibility, even in such a commercial environment as an art fair in New York. Next slide, please. This is the last physical art fair that we've been able to do before COVID. This was in December at NADA Miami Beach. And this was a presentation with new works by Nicholas Sassoon. It's all new media. We were actually only one of two galleries in the entire 100 gallery fair that was showing new media work. which was interesting, but you know, it was not what people were necessarily expecting. There's a lot of paintings, and so we were happy to like kind of present space for new kinds of work like this. Next slide, please. This is another art fair presentation. This is an art at Propositions Brussels. So we were actually given a parking space in a disused atelier in the basement of this building, and we had to make do. But because the gallery occasionally does pop up exhibitions in random spaces around the city, as the art demands it, we were able to like kind of pivot even when it's not an ideal white cube space. And I actually kind of like curating to non-white cube spaces. Next slide, please. Okay, so this year, art fairs are not dead. We're participating in a number. So Papier Montreal had an art fair where they actually developed an app that has augmented reality. So you take a picture of the work to the edge, and then you could like figure out where the floor is in the wall, and you could pop the work up on the wall, as was the case for this drawing that we like mocked up in the space in the gallery. And then we also participated in a very innovative like New York Art Fair, NADA, online, where there was a profit sharing model that was very much in response to the fact that galleries weren't selling very much, and it was a collaborative kind of financial model, which was interesting. I'll get into that in the question and answer if anybody's interested. Next slide, please. One of the other things that we also started doing are online exhibitions. This is one example of an online exhibition. This is a show by Stephen Cottingham. The tricky thing about the show is that if you look at the picture at the bottom, it looks like there's artworks in a physical space, but actually the whole thing was photoreal software generated. So you can see that the artwork was actually CGI'd. For lack of a better word, and so was the environment. So everything was constructed, none of it was real, but it was a way for the artist to quote unquote make work and have a discourse around his practice without actually building the sculptures and finding a space as grand as this. We sold the work by commission, which was an experiment. Next slide, please. One of the other things that I did this summer that was sort of new for me was to curate via Zoom. So this is an example of like a work by Jeffrey Hallbauer that was curating in this installation alongside like that chair by Rudolf Steiner and a few other pieces by Don Milo, who's actually the artist who's holding up Jeff's fabric painting that we were installing at the ceiling at the time. So this involved getting on Zoom 3 times within a few days and like hanging out for a couple hours at a time and leaving Zoom on, just so we could chat with each other as the installation was going on. Next slide, please. And lastly, the gallery sort of revels in exploring really new ways of contemporary art in a commercial context. So one of the things that we've done this year is to develop a work with the artist Evan Stevens of performance. It literally is a work that's been iterated like 3 times in the last 12 months. The most recent iteration was at the Wits de Wits in Rotterdam when she performed. And then the bottom right image is me sweeping up the flour and water sticky goop that like she was the residue of her performance because she performed the work about 10 times in one weekend. And curators also have to pick up a mop every so often. And so I just wanted to like leave on that note. Thanks very much.
So Henry, you'll be next.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Will, for the amazing presentation. And thanks, Kathy, for organizing this panel. And also Melanie and Shaun on being part of the panel as well. My name is Henry Heng Lu. I'm the curator and interim executive director at Center A, Vancouver International Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. So before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that Center A is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, on which we create, learn, and live. Unceded means that this land was never surrendered, relinquished, or handed over in any way. We recognize that the indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed from the homelands and territories upon which an institution was built and currently occupies and operates in. To acknowledge this traditional territory is to recognize the city and country's longer history predating Confederation, one where indigenous people have lived since time immemorial. Also located in Vancouver's Chinatown, Center A also acknowledges and recognizes the complex and multi-layer experiences of the individuals that who have lived, built, and contributed to the vibrancy of this historic neighborhood, and those who continue to do so today. And so for the panel, for this public program tonight, I would like to share a little bit about who we are and some of the exhibitions that we have done this year, and what initiatives and programs that we have taken, organized since the beginning of the pandemic. So I will share my screen. So Center A Vancouver International Centre for Contemporary Asian Art is the only public art gallery in Canada that's dedicated to contemporary Asian and Asian diasporic perspectives since 1999. And we have had multiple locations since the very beginning in the around the Chinatown area, and currently we're located on 268 Kiefer Street inside Sunhua Center, which is in an emerging kind of arts hub, because we do have neighbors upstairs, for example, our there are artist studios and also other arts organizations. So why don't I just quickly go to our website as well. So this is our website, and I encourage everybody to explore, because there are quite some interesting information. But I think that basically since March, since the lockdown and then the start of the pandemic, really we had to be more flexible in terms of our programming, and really you know, in a way, giving the chance to the opportunity to rethink how we could engage our audience, stay connected with our audiences, and also think about accessibility and how to create viewing experiences without the bodies in the gallery. So in April, we organized an exhibition by Brooklyn-based artist Pixie Liao. The exhibition was part of the Capture Photography Festival, and the show was called Experimental Relationship for Your Eyes Only, or Maybe Mine Too. The project really came out as Pixie's ongoing exploration of gender behaviors and dynamics, especially within the domestic settings. And she and her muse slash boyfriend, Morrow, who's pictured here, would often pose in particular ways in different settings. And also they formed a band called PMO Band, and they will perform together as performances, and they do concerts as well. So unfortunately, the show, we finished installing the show, and then we had to close the gallery literally just right after that. So we quickly pivoted this exhibition online. we pivoted the exhibition online, and the website holds all the photo works and also the installation views and a lot of the video works and even the artist books as well. We also organize some public programming kind of like that went along with it. But in a way, it's interesting how this project, it was really about intimacy and how to honor those like very tiny and very tiny and intimate moments in the daily life. And then we were able to present it in this way through the online platform. So in a way, it kind of created a very interesting layer to this exhibition itself. So this show, although it has been taken down and it's not in the gallery anymore, however, we extended the viewing duration for it through this website, which you'll be able to access through Century A's website, just under the exhibition section, so that you can explore a lot more about it. We also did an artist talk. This was sort of before, at the start of all of the Zoom, Zoom kind of assembly of events and everything. So it was quite interesting how people were so energetic and then participated in conversations with the artists as well. So then we had to go through a temporary closure of a few months. And then we, in August, we finally reopened with the new exhibition called We Cast Spells on the Mothers of Our Daughters and Daughters of Our Mothers, which is curated by Hannah Amani, our annual curatorial intern. So every year, Century A would because mentorship is part of Century A's priorities in terms of supporting emerging artistic and curatorial practices. So this exhibition really, to me, it's a wonderful demonstration of such commitment, but also how we are really glad that we'll be able to support this exhibition curated by Hannah. The show is a group show with 5 artists, Denise Rama, Fiona Zhao, Yan Chaolin, Parvin Privati, and also Mitra Mahudi. But it's a show that explore intergenerational cultural rituals and magic. The show is currently open at the gallery and available for viewing from Wednesday to Friday, 12 to 5 p.m. And also Saturday by appointment. We also, for accessibility and for people who might not want to come to the gallery, we also created the website for people to view the exhibition. Sorry, this kind of came out a little bit slowly, but maybe that's one way to have a little bit of surprise when you visit. And but hopefully through these ways that no matter where we are, we're able to connect and then to look at the works and to keep engaged with art as well. Another piece I want to briefly mention is that we do have an ongoing roster of online programming. So most recently, we just did an artist talk with Yan Chaolin, who's in our current exhibition, and talk about the film, the spirit keepers of Makutai. And Yan Chao was able to tune in from Montreal. And in August, we also had a program with Justin Schroeder, who tuned in from Sydney, Australia. And then we talk about the performance that Justin was able to do a little bit earlier during the day, and talk about some of the the Filipino diaspora and the queer mythologies and how they interact in this diasporic settings. Perhaps another project I will mention is Pacific Crossings. So Pacific Crossings is a collective of colleagues from across BC in collaboration with Richmond Art Gallery, Center A, and also Nanaimo Art Gallery. We connect BC with the other side of the ocean to create conversations and dialogues. And we most recently organized a series of 3 public events called Triangulations, for which we reach out to colleagues, artists and curators in Hong Kong, in Beijing, and also Manila to create projects as well. Just to be mindful of the time, I also want to encourage everybody to follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram it's quite fun, I would say, because we do have a lot of different initiatives on there. For example, we have Instagram takeovers, and then we will have the most recently launched Insta salons. We did one with Pixie, and also we did one with Parvin Pavati, one of our current visiting artists. And recently, our curatorial assistant, Charisma, was able to delve into some of our archives and then to find out some of the interesting exhibitions that Century has produced in the past. So keep in touch, and I think there is more to come in the coming months, so just stay tuned. I think that's about it from me. And I'm happy to answer any questions or anything that might have interested you on what I have introduced. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. That's great. So we'll hear from Shaun, who will introduce a bit of what he's done over the last little while. And then we'll delve into questions. So take it away, Shaun.
Well, first of all, I really want to thank Will and Henry. They're both community organizers and curators that I really admire in the community. Will is someone that, since I've lived in Vancouver, launched into starting his own space, and just hearing him talk right now and how innovative and how interesting his programming is, and so many opportunities he's given to artists. I remember moving here and feeling like there were so few opportunities for local artists to show in a commercial or in a market setting, and Will and a few others have really helped change that. So a big thank you to him, and a big thank you to Henry for being at Center A, and an organization that has meant so much to the local community, and to see Henry there now and doing what he does. And we are very lucky also at Richmond Art Gallery to have Henry as the curatorial assistant and help us out a little bit. Has been really great. I'm also looking at the participant list today, and I see a lot of familiar names and faces and people I've seen at Artist Salon events. And I wish and I hope there's a time soon where we can be at the gallery together and talk in person. I find this format a little limiting, but we'll go with it. I'm here in Gastown where I live, and it's on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. It's a site where so much violence and trauma has happened and continues to happen to our Indigenous communities, to our BIPOC communities. And it's something that is really important in thinking about how we organize or how we curate. Understanding the place and understanding where we are and whose land we're on is so important to me, and how I can create space and a platform for so many artists, speakers, thinkers to have a conversation. And how can we make these spaces, which can seem very intimidating to people like my mother or my siblings or most people, these white cubes, how can they be more welcoming and more inclusive? And I really commend, in certain ways, I'm a retired curator in the sense that I'm now a director, and I really look to my team, Kathy and Melanie and Nan and everyone else who do such a great job of hosting and welcoming people to the Richmond Art Gallery. So imagine when we were like this. I forgot what that feels like. Yeah, my curatorial practice, I entered curation through the back door as a art educator and a public programmer. So I really have this specific view of curating. For me, collaboration is key. I love being a part of a team. For me, supporting an artist through their ideation and creating that platform, as I said before, is really important to me. Going to curatorial school, there was a lot of debate around the role of the curator and how heavy-handed or not heavy-handed we should be. But I really find joy in commissioning new work and giving the artists an opportunity and kind of getting out of the way and really offering care and support to them. Another really important aspect for me is context and site specificity. Hopefully galleries are porous spaces, and the work a lot of artists do now tumbles out into the quote real world. And I'm really fascinated about where people encounter art. So a lot of my interest lies in testing those sites or creating those interactions and playing around with those interactions. And really thinking, working in artist-run centers, working in public galleries, really understanding that as a curator, you're just one part of a larger thing. The history of that institution, the mandate of that institution, the community that institution is surrounded by. So for me, it's really important aspect is how does this work specifically connect to the people that live around where the gallery is? How can art be this, hopefully be this really amazing gathering point for discussion about things that are on the minds of people that are living, 1 minute away. So those are things that I have really been thinking about through the past decade or so of curating. I was just looking through photos of the past projects I've done, and there's this, I get very excited and emotional about it. So I'll quickly maybe tap on a few of the ones that I love. So this is when I worked at Burnaby Art Gallery, and I was the public programmer, and really playing around with that gray area, as I said, between public programming and curating. We have this beautiful park, Deer Lake Park, and this incredible artist, Holly Schmidt, who I invited to create an heirloom vegetable garden for the summer, where we grew all kinds of things from quinoa to kale, and hosted a curated set of events, of curated meals based upon different tastes, and really kind of meeting. I noticed this public outside that walks in the park but never comes into the gallery. So wanting to engage and create opportunities and sort of this public space and these workshops that Holly organized. This is a cheesemaker from Maine Island who led a workshop on cheese making. Then working at the Contemporary Art Gallery, I had the huge privilege of running a residency program at a marina underneath the Burrard Bridge, and being able to really slowly develop projects. A big part of me is thinking beyond exhibitions and other ways that we can support artistic practice, and giving that time for ideation and introspection and reflection, I think, is very important. This is a project with an artist named Marie Lorenz, who's been building boats for decades now, and taking people out onto the New York waterways. I invited her to build a boat from scratch in Vancouver, kind of sharing the way she does that, and then inviting people to float down the Fraser River from all the way from Hope to New West. And there was every day that we were floating down the river for an hour, there'd be a live webcam feed where you could really experience the movement of the water on the boat. I mean, this picture here, we're not on the water, but most other days we were. So just being able to be there through these moments of engagement, discussion, collaboration. This is another project with the Field House, with Keg de Souza, really now thinking about downtown East Side and Chinatown as a food desert, thinking about what sort of high quality, affordable food there was in the neighborhood, and inviting people to add to this map, kind of outlining histories, food histories and food futures in this space that we rented in Chinatown, right near where Center A is. And she also invited people to collect elements from Chinatown, and she created this kind of simple installation that really becomes a time capsule of this moment as Chinatown is gentrifying and certain histories are disappearing, certain food cultures. This time capsule that she's created. I just love this messy picture, sorry. And this was another project at the Field House where Daria Akai invited different grandmothers from different, who live in Vancouver, but had migrated there to share a meal and to teach him what they know. And this very beautiful moment happened. Billiana, who actually runs public art for the city of Richmond, her grandmother and her mother, 3 generations of Bulgarian women, came together and made a meal with Daria and shared it with a group of, it was open to the public, a group of people. So thinking about those moments of exchange and those moments where art connects with the everyday or connects with kind of non-artists, I really love. So now at Richmond, I'm really considering how we can better represent, better reflect, give opportunities for conversation and really reflect what the Richmond community is and its histories and its tensions. So I'll just leave it with this piece by Ho-Tam, an exhibition we had a few years ago. These are paintings of Chinese businessmen taken from real estate ads and other kind of found instances. And it was actually paralleled with, I don't have it here, but a similar amount of portraits of Hong Kong film hunks, really paralleling young and old, and really thinking about visibility and representation and reflection and connection with our communities. But I will leave it there, and because I love the conversation more, and I want to hear from everybody else. So thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, Shaun, and thank you both Will and Henry as well. So we have one question so far, but I do invite everyone else to send in your questions. This one's very specific, so I think we can make it kind of open it up to more general. It was asking how in your current exhibition, how did you discover these artists and their work? So maybe you can just kind of each overall touch on like, how do you find the artists that you work with? I don't know who wants to start.
Thank you for your question, Ife. So, so our current exhibition is curated by our curatorial intern, Hannah Amani, and the internship and the exhibition are part of our commitment to supporting younger practices, or let's say artistic and cultural practitioners. So Hannah was, so part of the process was that Hannah was able to conduct, let's say, like visual studio visits with some of the fresh graduates of our schools across the country, although most of which are the ones in BC. So through these studio visits, these visual studio visits, Hannah was able to, talk to the artists, know their work, what they're working on, and especially, during the peak of the first wave, and then how they would be able to, how they might have adjusted their practice and how to move things online and stuff like that. So, and of course, the artists were very like open to meeting and then to discuss their works. So I think that mostly that's how they connected. And but I guess as part of the internship, Hannah was able to, our intern was able to reach out to different schools as well, and then to see, let's say, okay, the thesis exhibitions got canceled, but I would like to know more, stuff like that. And of course, I think that thanks to the internet, there's a lot of info online as well. So we are able to locate those information.
Anyone else? How do you normally find your artists?
Well, like it's a manner of different ways. So as Henry said, there's things like the internet, like we're all online, and there's my Instagram is full of art accounts that pop up, and I'm always sort of looking. So like, for instance, Julia Rose Sutherland's work was discovered online, and there's a number of artists who I've been doing studio visits with recently who have come across my my site in a similar way. But actually, like, I think like, can't be underestimated the notion of networks. So I feel like I owe a great deal of like gratitude and debt to, for instance, like Marina Roy, who was the third exhibition at the gallery and who teaches at UBC, and so many of her past students are artists who I now work with at the gallery, because they share a certain like set of ideas or ideologies, and a lot of the time I'm sort of introduced to new artists by artists who I'm already working with, and that's, I feel like that's up until when I started seeking out artists through different means, that was really sort of the majority of the way that I was like coming across artists' work. Also, it sort of guarantees that there's a kind of like discourse amongst the different shows, that the shows add up to a program of sorts, right? So yeah, those are two ways.
Yeah, I totally agree with what they both said. The art world is a very social world, so those networks, as far as local artists, through word of mouth, through people asking for studio visits, through seeing exhibitions. So I would say, and I would say for my own career, if I waited around to get hired by Vancouver Art Gallery or big institutions, I would get nowhere. I mean, I think putting on a show anywhere, inviting people to come to see something at a cafe, finding the galleries that you like, that you think your work fits, and going to openings and meeting people and following it and going to events and starting to be recognized and building that confidence to ask for a studio visit. That's where I kind of get excited and want to work with someone, is being able to go to their studio and see what they're making. And that's where I get won over all the time, and it's harder to say no to things, and because it gets really, I get excited about it. But, you know, beyond that, of course, yeah, these artists I work internationally is about research and reading art press and going to their websites. And so I think the digital is now so important, and that Instagram and that website, you know, this is where curators are looking. So, and be able to send that to people in an email when you are asking for a studio visit helps so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's I think all of us here today definitely receive a lot of requests for perhaps you know, receive like portfolios and you know, request a meeting, things like that. And it's probably there were probably even more with COVID, because people do want to share their work and then to spread the word out. So I think that that's totally fine. And because now we are sort of distancing from each other, so it's I myself, for example, personally would love to know more about who's out there and who's knocking on my door, and I would like to have a chat. Well, but this doesn't really mean like, okay, you know, move your work into the gallery, but it's always good to chat with someone and to build that network. I do think that it's a very small world, and people sort of know each other in different ways. So make sure to be out there. But I mean, if someone didn't respond to your email for like 2 weeks, I mean, a month, maybe they're not interested. So maybe not just keep following up. Sorry, I feel like that's sort of a digression, but it's always good to meet and chat. Another thing I want to quickly sort of mention is that I think we should reposition sort of the power of curators, because I think that we are definitely in an age where some artists might rely on celebrity curators. I do think that's kind of wrong way of working, because artists are the ones who really produce the works, and at the end of the day, it's really how I think that curatorial gestures should accommodate the power that the artworks hold. So it's my advice is definitely to not get into all of these I would say politics in a way, and then to really focus on your own practice. And then when you have that confidence, I think that's it would just shine everywhere.
So many artists locally are doing amazing things. I think of Duplex. I think of collectives of artists that are creating spaces and putting on shows and getting their names out there, and the institutional curators come running. So I think make your own shows. Anyway, at Richmond Art Gallery, we also have open calls at times, and I will make a shameless pitch that we do currently have an open call for Black, Indigenous, and racialized artists or collectives for the upcoming Capture Festival. So, you know, there are many people and many galleries around that still do open calls. So that's another way that we quote curate as well.
Well, that really leads into Yafai's question, talking about just now in the times of COVID. So how, you know, we're not able to go to openings, we're not able to mingle and network in person. So are there ways, especially for an emerging artist, to bring, you know, their works to the attention of a curator? And I know in other talks we've held at the salon, it's always been encouraged, DIY, have a open studio day, pop-up shows. Instagram is always important, but are there other options for an emerging artist?
I'll start. I kind of feel like there's sort of like a lack of physicality nowadays, but I feel like the need to connect and like that need to like happen to something larger, a larger community or a larger set of ideas with art is stronger than ever in a way, because we were spending weeks and months sort of in relative self-isolation. So I over the summer, I was very surprised at how things actually shifted. Like initially when COVID first started, there was a lot of predictions in the art press that everything's going to become increasingly localized, that people are going to want to take care of the communities within their own regions, and that everything's going to like become regionalized, which, like Vancouver has a really strong art history, but if you look at even region as all of Canada, it to me, it feels like it's a terrific kind of like country for art, but like it's also not sufficient for me to like just keep it at that. The gallery does a lot of international art fairs as a result, because we want to tap into a larger international art dialogue. But what I found over the summer was actually quite the opposite. Because people were not able to meet in person, it actually opened up the geographic possibilities because everybody went online. So if you're an emerging artist and you're seeing a show at a gallery and you are sort of really feeling like you're connecting with that show, I would still encourage you to send like an email to like an earnest one to like say, I saw the work, I really kind of, like connected with this, or, my practice relates to it in this way. And I think if it's sincere, that there's sort of like a way to have a discourse, much like as natural as it would be if it was in person, and that's sort of like the number one advice I give to a lot of artists. Like the cold calling, it's not such a good idea, but if you really feel like if you're, for instance, spending a lot of time on my website and like looking at a lot of art and feel like you have a discourse with the artists that I show, then I'm more than happy to like have a discussion about your work, but I find a lot of the time, maybe like people just make lists. So like I'm one of like, a dozen galleries that they want to like connect with in Vancouver, even if their work doesn't really fit sort of like what the gallery is doing. And I think that's sort of like not such a great discussion. But yeah, cold calling and connecting, I think is not like forbidden, nowadays. And actually there's a lot more of it happening. And like my connections are now international. Like tomorrow morning, I have a call with somebody in Paris at 10 a.m. And like that never happened before, like these phone calls are like quite weekly internationally. So yeah.
One thing I would say is that because of how the funding, the granting system is set up, so a lot of the institutions, they program 2 or 3 years ahead. So that's the case at Center A, for example, at probably at the Richmond Art Gallery as well. So sometimes there might not be a lot of flexibilities in terms of programming. For example, let's say you send in like a portfolio or a proposal to the gallery, they may not be able to respond to it like right away, because they have to do some planning, and then they have their own agenda, let's say, or schedule. But yeah, I would say it wouldn't hurt to send in those materials, because because for example, I would definitely keep them in my mind, just in case that, not just in case, I mean, if there's any sort of fitting opportunities come up, then I would probably do a little bit search in my mind and saying like, oh, I think I know someone who did that, right? And then I went back to the email and said, oh, that's that, great, amazing. And then sort of making all the threads. So it's okay as long as you're not like, hey, please show my work. I think that's the worst email I've ever got, is like, please show my work or something. And I mean, not even please, just something like that. I do think that that was a little bit bizarre, because I would love to meet you and talk about your work, but maybe not just upfront making a request, right? So, but I think at the end of the day, it's really just to talk to people and to be part of the network.
And maybe now's a good time to invest in how you outreach, whether it's your website or your Instagram, or I think there's a lot of funding opportunities at the moment. If that's something that you do, Canada Council, BC Arts Council, there's also a lot of open calls floating around, public art opportunities, mural festival. So I agree. I totally agree with everything they're saying, and keep pushing. I mean, this is a hustle. We all need to do it, and you know, I agree with what Will said. Is you need to do your research and really understand your practice and where you see it fitting within the ecology of Vancouver, and really connecting with that, finding people who will advocate for your work, who love your work. Could be your friends, it could be someone who runs a cafe. Just seeking out allyship, people that want to support the amazing thing that you do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or make your own. I mean, as many
Make
artists
your own.
have. Make your own community, make your own collective, make your own pop-up gallery, as so many have.
Mm-hmm.
Question from Hannah Marie. Assuming that in the not too future, we will return back to experiencing art exhibitions in person, is there something you will continue to bring into your curatorial practice that was brought on by the pandemic?
Well, we are experiencing art in person now. I think all three of our galleries are open to the public, and we would love to have you visit.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I know that a lot of institutions like Vancouver Art Gallery and others could really use your support of going to visit. And there's a lot of great art up right now. But for me, I would say at Richmond Art Gallery, really shifting to the digital. We are really investing in being able to live stream, performances, being able to share these sorts of video discussions after the fact, and to reach to a much broader audience. I think Will was speaking to that reach, that we can be part of an international dialogue as well as a local dialogue. And I know the work that Henry and I and Jesse Birch and Mikiko and Allison have been doing with Pacific Crossings. It's so exciting we hosted talks through the summer that were with practitioners from China, Hong Kong, Philippines, Tokyo, really sharing their experience of COVID and learning from each other. So really harnessing those opportunities to reach beyond. But also so great when I look at the participants coming tonight are so many people that have actually come to our Artist Salon events. So balancing those two sides. And I know so many artists are also wanting to play with the digital, the in-gallery experience and the remote experience. And it's really great to see what Will and Henry have been doing at their institutions to play with that simultaneity, or that digital viewing and the in-gallery.
Great. Another question from Ketty. Who are your favorite artists, locally and otherwise? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, this is yeah, I mean, we don't have it. Well, we shouldn't play sort of favoritism, because we just love everybody. And yeah. I don't
think
know.
you're
I
supposed to
really
see the
love
show that's
Emily
up now.
Neufeld. Emily Neufeld
Yeah.
is an amazing artist that has a show at Richmond Art Gallery right now that everyone should come and see. I really love artists that have a well-researched practice. I mean, I'm someone that loves reading historical fiction and nonfiction, so I'm someone that really falls for documentary style, pseudo-documentary, but also love the kind of whimsy. I love artists like Daria Akai, who I spoke about. I mean, I could go. I won't keep name dropping because I agree with plain favoritism, but yeah. Sorry.
I mean, deep inside, we definitely have someone that we really like.
I love
just...
Patrick. I love Patrick's work. I love the show that's up at Will Space right now. I also think the show at Center A people should check out. There's some young emerging artists. Yeah.
I'm just generally excited with the next few shows. There's some really interesting new artists that we're working with, in an effort to like expand the opportunities for the space to show artists' practices. So I'm really kind of excited for the next 12 months that the gallery's programming is going to go. I'll mention the next one. So the next one's Charles Campbell. So it opens October 24th, and he's actually based in Victoria. He's a West Coast artist, but he's Jamaican Canadian. And we're going to be showing primarily two large works. So like a painting that is 25 feet wide, that's 6.5 feet tall, and a large sculpture. I just ordered the plinth. It's like 7.5 by 5.5 feet, large. And the work is arriving on Thursday from Perez Art Museum in Miami, where it was just shown in the last 8 months. So I'm excited about that. Like, because I'm kind of working on the shows over the next like 8 months. My head's in it. So like I have to parse everything that the artist is feeling and thinking in the emails, on the websites, like in the articles that's been written, interviews that they've given that's captured on video. So like I'm quite like in a research / pseudo obsessive state with all of that work. But outside of Vancouver, just like in the stratosphere of art, today I was really obsessing over Huma Baba. I love her work. So I just so I don't choose a local favorite, I'll choose an international favorite. At this particular moment, it's Huma Baba. Super obsessed. So
Thank you. A question from Joselito. Although I would consider Will, you're a commercial gallery because you sell work, but so Shaun and Henry, how do you think you differ from like a commercial gallery curator, or do you think you differ? Will, I mean, how do you think you differ from a more commercial space?
Henry, do you want to take it first? I can take it too.
Yeah, I'm also just looking at the question again. Well, I think that it really depends on the organization and institution, right? Because Century A, for example's mandate is to support artists of Asian descent, artists, let's say, based from Asia or the Asian diasporic communities as well. So I think that it's the institutional curator. There is the organizational mandate that and vision that we are following through, and and then I just think that different organizations, they have different goals basically, and like Century A is also like different from, let's say, some of the Artist Salon centers who I would say maybe more committed to supporting emerging artists, or specifically, let's say, supporting emerging media arts practices, let's say. So everyone sort of has its own focus. So that's I would say what the difference is. I wouldn't speak for for Will or any commercial gallery, but I think that it also depends on the curator's interests as well.
Yeah, I think I would quickly say that. Well, I said it in my intro. I just love being at that experimental ideation moment, and with government support and with a little bit of fundraising, we're able to offer artists an opportunity to push the boundaries of what their art making is. And a lot of more traditional commercial spaces, there's more of a push of understanding their clientele and what could sell. But I will say I also love that there are more and more project spaces like Will's that offer a little bit of both. And I mean, I don't think in Canada we like to pretend they are separated out, but there's gray area, and the way that we curate and the projects that we do and the funding that we fundraise through grant writing and other forms also helps an artist build a career in the commercial side and to sell art to collectors. So, I mean, I think we're all in it. We're all in it together. And I'm liking how things are blurring a lot right now. So, yeah.
Great. Question from Sandra. Do you prefer to work with artists who have a formal art education over self-taught artists?
I don't care. I mean, for me, it's really comes down to, I'm a Sagittarius, so it comes down to the vibe, the feeling that I get. And I mean, yeah, I will say that I do have a graduate degree, and I think if you can get into a program where you're well supported. It's such an amazing space to develop research and to make connections, because it is a networked world in a social world, and I think it really can help hone how to connect with and how to talk and how to pitch ideas and talk about them. So but you don't, at the flip side, you also don't need that, just like I don't need a degree to curate a show. So it's not a thing for me.
Yeah.
Oh, Will, you want to go ahead?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I think that's basically, personally, I think that sort of difference between having a formal education, going through the entire school system, and getting MFAs, fine arts degrees, and let's say the idea of like self-taught. I think that personally, I think that the school system offers opportunities for you to connect with your peers, and then to create dialogues, and then it's kind of like going through like an evaluation system, but also there is a lot of exchange in terms of ideas and just art making in general. So I think that that's maybe what's the most precious about like a school system, is that you will actually get to hear what people say about your work, and their insights, and not just from the instructors, but also from your peers. So that's something really could be really useful. However, I think that if you're a self-taught artist, and if you can think through like what you want to do, and you have a clear picture of what you are bringing to your practice, and what you are proposing in a way, I think that's there isn't that much of a big difference, because I think that at the end of the day, if you know what you're doing, you are like halfway there. So I think a lot of the problem is that and nowadays a lot of the let's say practitioners, they might they are too involved into this more bureaucratic system, and so instead of like focusing on creating or really thinking through what they want to do, it kind of falls down to you know, just purely going through the system. So I think that we should, no matter you are getting a degree or you are at home practicing, I think that really think about what you would like to do. That's more important. Yeah, that's my kind of personal take on this.
Great.
I agree generally with what Henry just said and what Shaun has said. Yeah, I think it's sort of like I have to get a sense that like someone has figured out what their set of ideas are. And personally, like this is a very subjective thing, but I like to imagine what the show would be, the third show out would be. And the reason why I like to think about that is that commercial market development is often quite slow. Like, you know, you put on a show, people aren't necessarily going to buy the work, particularly if your set of ideas are complicated and difficult, which happens to be like, I think what I end up choosing a lot of the time, much to my dismay as a business person on the business side of things. So I like to kind of meet artists who feel like there's sort of three shows there, you know, like, and a lot of the time that kind of development of ideas is bolstered by ideas that they get through school and that peer review that happens, which I think is so crucial. It's not important that someone go through school, but actually like thinking about the shows that I've done, I might be wrong, but I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who's not finished a BFA or an MFA, unfortunately. Like, but I'm not opposed to it. Like on the market side, there's some collectors do look for that on a CV. Some collectors are very like, they'll scrub your CV, they'll figure out where your education is, like what year you graduated, who your peers were, what shows you got, like in which museum at one point, to see how you're tracking as an artist and like make their decisions as to whether they want to acquire your work that way. But there's also market opportunities for like non-educated artists, people who are like self-taught. Like there's venues like in New York, there's the Outsider Art Fair. So like as a dealer, I'm not necessarily opposed to like taking on somebody who isn't schooled, but like the ideas should be pretty strong and they should hold their own when compared against other artists who may have finished an MFA or something. Some people just have it, you know? So like if they don't need school and they have their set of ideas, then go for it. Like save yourself the time and money and just like make the work, so.
And no student loans. So that's great.
Well, that leads to the next question, apparently a super quick question from Calvin. What was your educational path and how did it lead you to curating and directing?
So I did my undergrad at U of T in studio art and art history. So I used to attempt to make art. And then I went into photography, like commercial photography, and I hated it, but I started an internship at Gallery TPW, which is an artist-run center that's photo focused. And I just fell in love with the contemporary art scene and artist-run scene in Toronto. And I worked at Oakville Galleries as a school summer program youth coordinator, and I just loved being in galleries, and I loved the idea of, because I didn't really make my own art, I loved kind of helping out other artists or really thinking through their practice. So I started curating things for free, getting any gigs I could get, and eventually got into the UBC curatorial program, which I really enjoyed because it was a small cohort and we were given a budget to produce an exhibition. And yeah, through that, I'm made connections in Vancouver, and the show I did my graduate show in Access Gallery I was offered a job to run it after, for very, very little pay, and I had to have 2 other jobs. But from there, I just, you know, built a career. But, you know, there was that moment, you know, with the question about getting a degree. There's definitely was a moment where all these curatorial master's programs popped up, and people, it felt like it was my only path to getting an institutional job, was to get a degree, and maybe that is true. And I know for a while there, everyone from my program got a job until there was no jobs left. So the curators kind of job prospects in the industry, it reached a saturation point. So it's interesting. It's been interesting to see the hires at different institutions now, where, you know, where it used to be, you know, master's degree curatorial students getting these jobs. Now we're seeing more diversity and more shift, and, you know, people who are artists are running organizations in Vancouver now. And so I'm really happy to see that change as well. But I mean, I'll say the program did really help me, and was very privileged to be in it and helped me get my start. So. Henry, also, you have a master's degree, right?
Yes. Will, did you want to go first?
I don't have a master's degree. I have a master's degree, but not in fine arts or curatorial studies. I actually took engineering at University of Waterloo. So it's a very unusual path for me. But actually, I mean, the thing is, most commercial gallerists, directors of commercial galleries, because it's sort of like an entrepreneurial endeavor where you make your own conditions, and you make the organization entirely on your own. They don't have this kind of degree. Like the only, like being in engineering at Waterloo, the only opportunity I had to take art courses was electives in 3rd year in like art history. So it's really interesting that like now I feel like I know so much about art, but so much of it is self-taught. A lot of it was like, I was collecting for about 10, 15 years, very heavily, very like obsessively, which involved like doing a lot of studio visits. And at one point I was asked to organize some talks, which was my first sort of opportunity to work with artists and their sensibilities, and like kind of figured out how you navigate and negotiate that, so that you arrive at like the intended result for both parties, the organizer of the thing and the artist. And then when I saw that a lot of the commercial galleries that I love, that were presenting platforms for young artists, were closing, I decided I would open my own gallery. Foolishly first, because I really didn't know what I was doing. You know, there's a lot involved in this. And so it's taken me the greater part of 8 years to really kind of figure out what is going on and what one needs to do and how you make opportunities happen, what are the right things, the right steps for me and the artists involved, and the team here. So, and it's constantly shifting. Like I feel like every few months, contemporary art shifts ground, and you have to stay on top of it. So I read a lot. I'm always consuming information, because there's always new information happening, and it's, yeah, that's my bag.
Yeah, I did my undergrad in arts management, arts administration, so which was quite a niche kind of program when I first started, and so I got to know more about, you know, the nonprofit sector and how to operate the space when your goal is not to generate revenue, and on the side, as part of the program requirement, I was able to take studio practice courses, and all kinds of stuff that I was taking. I was taking like drama and art history, like Asian studies and stuff like that. So, but what I'm trying to say is that whatever's on the side, like these studio practice courses and art history courses, and even, I don't know, calculus. So these are in a way kind of supplementary to your core studies, because you really get to have more perspectives. Because so I did that, and then I received my master's in visual studies program at U of T. In the curatorial studies stream. So because there was like a diversity, there was a range of studies that I had the opportunity to take, I think that my perspectives were more, were enhanced, basically, because you don't curate just because you are a curatorial studies degree, because that's not enough. Curating is not just about assembling a lineup of artists and then put them in a gallery. To me, it's more, it's more like a holistic approach, because let's say, right, like now I am an institutional curator, so I would like to know what this exhibition, like how this exhibition is contextualized and positioned, and how that can create any dialogues with our neighbors, and then what it really means to the public. So there are all of those considerations in. So that's why when you have, let's say, oh, I happen to know a little bit of architecture, or I happen to know a little bit about, you know, geography or something like that. So they really help you to be able to not really rise above. I'm trying to find the better way to put it, but really help you to have more layers of thinking and also nuances, basically. So that's why I think that constant learning about what people think, and then understand what, like why some people have opposite thoughts to yours is important, because then it really opened up a lot of possibilities.
Great, thank you. We're not going to get to Janai's question, I think, just because it's very specific to Shaun. So I'd like to end, because we're almost out of time, with Jeffrey's question. Because getting an exhibition is so difficult, can you each quickly give a tip on how artists can organize their own exhibition?
Well, I feel like over the years, some of the best shows I've ever seen in Vancouver were sort of curated by artists. Like I find artists like Sunset Terrace, for instance, was an incredible space. And I tried to go to every single exhibition there because I loved how they organized exhibitions. And you know, like when I curate here in my own gallery, like if it's a solo exhibition, my job is really to like to have a dialogue with the artist, understand what it is that they're doing, but to kind of get out of the way and remove roadblocks for them. And like the artist, and well, I'm involved in the process, but a lot of the time I go with what the artist feels in terms of like hanging a show. These instincts are built in, I think, when you're making the work. And also reading other artists' work to contextualize them against your own or other artists that you might know, I think is a natural thing that happens. So I think in terms of, if you have a space and you can clean it up, where you could put on even a non-white QB show, I would just go for it. Like the most important chapter in Vancouver, the conceptual photographers, they all just they created their own condition. They did their own shows. They wrote about each other's work. They promoted each other's works to professional curators who came into town from elsewhere, and like things kind of snowballed from there. And now they're sort of like titans of the history here. So yeah, if you can do.
Henry, Shaun, any last tips for an artist to have their own show?
Yeah, everything Will said. And I think, you know, finding that space and doing it. It could be a digital space. It could be an in-person space. I remember in those early days when we were curating random shows, walking into restaurants and just cold asking, or like that cafe you really like, or that restaurant or whatever space is kind of asking. Sorry, there's something going on here. I mean, being okay with getting rejected as well, but you know, finding, as I said before, is finding your supporters, finding the people that believe in your talent and in your work, and kind of building something around that. Yeah, but if you have a studio, or if you have a home, I know many artists that just do shows in their home. I know curators that turned their apartment into a really great space that people wanted to come to. So sky's the limit. And sorry, I feel like Instagram, I know so many artists that just sell their work directly through Instagram. And you know, their Instagram account becomes an exhibition onto itself.
There's actually just a little anecdote. There's an Instagram account that I was following. It was called The White Column. I think it's no longer. The guy stopped, but he's an artist and he worked an office job. And right across from his cubicle was this like white column. And he literally just like co-opted it and would hang one work of art on this white column, photograph it as the show, post it on Instagram. And like, I got to be introduced to so many artists. At least I followed the Instagram, and like, it was easy. And I thought it was hilarious that he was called White Column, because there's a gallery in New York called White Columns. It's quite serious, and the opposite. But you know, like that's all he had, and he made the most of it. It was brilliant. So.
I also know people that have done it in their office. There's a architecture firm in Seattle, and they've turned a little office cubicle kind of space into a place they invite artists to do little projects in. So yeah, ask your boss.
I think that no matter what you do, make sure it's documented, because you make all the efforts and I don't know, throw a party and there was a show.
Spend money, yeah.
And spend, well, sure, but like, you make all of those efforts and then you realize, oh, there isn't anything I can savor like later. So it could be such a pity, right? So such a shame. So make sure it's documented, and then it will then now be part of your portfolio, and that's, you know, proof of what you have done. I will have to say that unfortunately, because, you know, nowadays there are so many online initiatives, so people would really get tired. So if you do more online, as much as I really enjoy online exhibitions, I have to say, like, people are very tired. So if you can do something physical, I think that's ideal. But of course, wear masks, and that's something could be fun, and to really get to know the work, because there's nothing, absolutely nothing can replicate sort of this physical kind of viewing arts, kind of in-person art viewing experience. And when it's safe, we should definitely do that. And I would also say, don't be shy to ask people for money. You know, there are definitely some grants out there you might be able to apply for. I don't know, small community grants, one-time projects, some universities, and yeah, you probably have to, you know, ask a lot of people, but I mean, if you could gather all those funds, why not, right? Maybe last thing I would say is that, just to connect it to what we have talked about earlier, I think that usually not some artists, they don't put their most recent works on their website. So it's good to let's say offer like a studio visit and talk about what like you're working on like right now, and then share with people, because some artists, they might only archive their projects like 2 years later, right? So definitely seen that. So it's always good to focus on like right now and then what you're working on. Pitch some ideas, and then talk to a bakery, I don't know, and spend some money on documenting, yeah, I think that would be great.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. I think we're out of time, so unfortunately, we couldn't get to everyone's questions. Someone did just say, though, if they have additional questions, should we email Kathy? Yes, please. You can email me, and I can always forward, especially if there's specific questions for one of our panelists today, I can forward them along. But thank you, everyone out there, for joining us today and sending in your questions. And thank you very much to Will and Henry and Shaun for agreeing to be on this panel with me today. It was great. Always learn a lot and it's just great to hear from different perspectives, different types of places, and all the different places you've come from as well. So thank you so much for sharing with us all today. So thanks, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you next month. All right.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Melanie, and Will and Shaun.
Thanks, everyone.